Hello there. Tonight, we are not going to talk about great battles. We are not going to talk about emperors or conquest, or the kind of history that arrives loudly and leaves scars. Tonight is quieter than that. Much quieter. We are going back. Not far back. Just a few decades after the story you already know. A few decades after the mist of the Yamatai. After the oracle bones and the bronze mirrors. After the 1,000 maidens breathing in the dark. After the great queen closed her eyes for the last time. You remember her. Himiko. The woman who spoke to the gods so that no one else had to. The bridge between the world of the living and the world of everything else. She is gone now, and the world she held together is starting to come apart. Tonight, we are going to follow someone else, someone younger, someone who did not ask for any of this. Someone who was 13 years old when the weight of an entire civilization was placed in her hands. Her name was Iyo. Some records call her Toyo. The Chinese chronicles of the way give us only a handful of sentences about her. A name, an age, and the quiet, extraordinary fact that the wars stopped when she appeared. That is almost all we know, and somehow that is enough. If this journey helps you find rest tonight, please feel free to like the video and subscribe. It lets me know that this work is reaching someone. And leave a comment. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what time it is. It is strangely comforting to know that somewhere, in the quiet of another person's night, someone else is drifting toward the same ancient and patient dark. Close your eyes now. Feel the weight of the day. Feel it sitting on your shoulders, heavy and familiar, the way a stone feels warm after a long afternoon in the sun. Now let it go. Not all at once. Slowly. The way smoke rises from a fire that has been burning for a long time and is finally being allowed to rest. Your breathing is already changing. You may not have noticed, but it is. Slower now. A little deeper. A little more willing to take its time. Good. You are no longer where you were. The modern world is behind you now. Its lights, its noise, its relentless forward insistence, all of it falling away, like the bark of an old cedar peeling slowly in long, quiet strips onto the dark forest floor. You are standing at the edge of a plain, the Yamatai plain. The same mineral smell of the soil, the same wide indigo sky, the same mountains, patient and dark on every horizon. But something is different tonight. The air is heavier, not with rain, with something harder to name. With the particular weight of a world that has just lost the one person who knew how to hold it together. Listen. The plain is quieter than it should be. The birds have not stopped singing. The wind is still moving through the grass. Shh. Shh. The rice paddies are still reflecting the last light of the evening in their flat silver mirrors. But underneath all of that, underneath the ordinary sounds of the ordinary world, there is something else. A tension, a held breath. The sound of 100 villages waiting to find out what comes next. Because the great queen is gone, and no one knows what comes next. Feel that uncertainty in the air around you. It is not a frightening feeling. It is a very old feeling. The feeling of a world pausing between one thing and another, between one era and whatever follows it. The feeling of standing in the space between two breaths. Breathe in the heavy, waiting air of the Yamatai plain. Let it fill your lungs with the mineral patience of the mountains. Breathe out slowly. Let your tired body settle. There is nowhere to go tonight. There is nothing to decide. There is only this plain, this sky, this waiting. And somewhere, in the heart of the Yamatai, in the palace of silk and cedar and shadow, a young girl is sitting very still. She is sitting the way she has been taught to sit, spine straight, hands in her lap, eyes not quite focused on anything in the physical world. She is 13 years old, and the elders are coming. Their footsteps are slow on the polished cedar floor. Scuff, scuff, scuff. They have something to ask her, something she already knows is coming, something she has known in some part of herself that is older than her 13 years, has been coming for a long time. She breathes in, she breathes out, she waits. This is where we begin, not with a battle, not with a decree, not with the clash of bronze or the smoke of a burning village. We begin with a girl sitting still in a room full of shadow, waiting for the weight of the world to be placed quietly in her hands. Listen. Listen to the sound of a center that is no longer holding. You are standing in the Yamatai, in the weeks after the great queen's passing, and the air of the palace has changed entirely. The 1,000 maidens are still here. Their breathing is still synchronized, still low, still a subharmonic hum that vibrates in the cedar floorboards. But the quality of that hum has shifted. It is no longer the hum of 1,000 souls organized around a single, unmoving point of authority. It is the hum of 1,000 souls that have lost their center and do not yet know what to do about it. The silk curtains are still hanging in their places. The bronze mirrors are still arranged in the treasury. The golden seal is still on its pedestal. Everything is where it was, and yet nothing is the same. Scuff, scuff, pause. Listen to the footsteps of the officials moving through the palace corridors. They are slower than they used to be, more hesitant. The particular, deliberate cadence of people who are accustomed to moving toward a center and who are now discovering that the center is gone and that moving deliberately in no particular direction is much harder than it looks. The chronicles of the way will record what happened next in plain, unhurried language. After Himiko died, a great mound was raised above her. More than 100 of her attendants followed her into the earth. And then a king was established in her place. A man this time. A king not a queen. A king whose name the chronicles do not bother to preserve, which tells you something about how well that arrangement worked. It did not work. Not at all. Feel the particular quality of that failure settling into the air of the plain. It is not a violent failure, not immediately. It is a quiet failure, the kind that begins with disagreements in rooms, with voices raised slightly higher than protocol allows, with tributary relationships that were maintained without difficulty under the Queen suddenly becoming complicated, contested, expensive. The 100 villages that sent their labour and their grain and their deference to the Yamatai did not do so because they were forced to. They did so because the centre was legitimate, because the oracle spoke, because the mirror reflected the spirit world with a clarity that no human argument could contest. A king does not have a mirror. A king has only the authority that other men are willing to recognize. And the men of the 100 villages, it turns out, are not particularly willing. Thud, thud, thud. The sound is coming from the south, from the direction of the Kunan, the kingdom that was always restless, even when Himiko was alive. But it is not just from the south. It is from the east too, and from the north. The drums of 100 local conflicts, each one small enough to be dismissed individually, together creating a deep, distributed rumble that travels through the soil of the plain like the first tremors of an earthquake that has not yet decided how serious it intends to be. Breathe in the uneasy air of the Yamatai without its queen. It is the same mineral smell, the same cedar and rain and paddy field sweetness. But underneath, there is something sharper. The metallic edge of tension, the dry smell of decisions being made in anger rather than in the deliberate, ritual calm of the oracle's chamber. This is the world that Iyo is about to inherit. She does not know this yet. Or perhaps she does, in that way that certain people seem to know things before the knowing is available to ordinary awareness. She is 13 years old, living within the palace complex, her life shaped by the same rituals and disciplines that shaped Himiko's life before her. She is being trained in the way that all potential oracles are trained, to be empty, to be quiet, to be a vessel. She is sitting in a small room at the eastern end of the palace. The light coming through the gaps in the wall planks is thin and grey, the particular grey of a morning that has not yet decided whether to become something more. She is holding a small bronze mirror in her lap, not one of the great ceremonial mirrors from the treasury, a personal one, small enough to fit in both hands. Its surface tarnished now, the reflection it gives back dim and slightly warped. She is looking into it, or through it. It is hard to say which. Inhale, and the mirror holds the grey light. Exhale, and the palace breathes around her. She can hear the footsteps in the corridor outside, the hesitant, directionless scuffing of the officials who no longer know which way to walk. She can hear, very faintly, the distant drums from the south. She can feel, in the soles of her feet through the cedar floor, the low vibration of a world that is beginning to shake itself apart. And she breathes in, out, in, out. This is all she can do right now. This is the only thing that is being asked of her right now. To breathe, to be still, to remain in the practice of emptiness that is the only preparation available for whatever is coming. The mirror in her lap reflects nothing recognizable, just the grey light, just the dim, patient surface of the bronze, just the suggestion of a face that is too young for what it is about to be asked to carry. Sink down into the grey morning of the eastern room. Sink down into the quiet, breathing stillness of the girl with the mirror. The palace is moving around her. The world is unraveling outside the walls. And she is still. She is practicing being still. She is learning that stillness, in a world coming apart at its edges, is not inaction. It is the most radical and the most difficult thing available. The drums are faint, but they are there. The footsteps are hesitant, but they are there. And the girl is breathing. In, out. In, out. Just breathe with her. Just rest. The world will ask its question soon enough. Listen. Listen to the sound of a decision being made in a room full of frightened people. The council chamber of the Yamatai is not a large room by the standards of the palace. It is a practical space, its walls of plain cedar planks, its floor of packed earth covered with woven rush mats, its only light coming from a row of ceramic oil lamps, whose flames are trembling slightly in the draft that moves through the chamber whenever the door is opened or closed. The men seated on the mats are the senior officials of the Yamatai, the administrators, the military commanders, the representatives of the great tributary chiefdoms. They are serious men, experienced men, men who have spent their careers navigating the complex political geography of the archipelago. And they are, very quietly, terrified. Scuff, settle, murmur, pause. Listen to the quality of the silence between their words. It is a heavy silence, dense with the particular anxiety of people who are trying to appear calmer than they are. The experiment with the king has failed. This is not a matter of opinion. The tributary relationships are fracturing. 3 chiefdoms in the south have stopped sending grain. 2 in the east have stopped sending messengers entirely. The drums from the direction of Kunan have been growing louder for 2 weeks. The question on the table is the same question that has been on every table in the palace since the king failed. What do we do? One of the older men speaks. His voice is low and measured, the voice of someone who has been saving this particular thought for the right moment and has decided the right moment has arrived. He speaks of Iyo, the girl, the one who has been in training since she was old enough to sit still for more than an hour. The one who carries, the elders say, something of the same quality that Himiko carried, the same receptivity, the same particular silence that feels, to those sensitive enough to perceive it, like a frequency rather than an absence. A woman, someone says. Another girl. There is a pause. The oil lamps tremble. Yes, the old man says. Another girl. He does not explain further. He does not need to. Everyone in the room understands what happened when they tried a king. Everyone in the room understands, with the specific, embodied understanding of people who lived through it, what the Yamatai was when Himiko sat at its center. The authority was not hers because she was powerful in the way that men with armies are powerful. The authority was hers because she was the bridge, because the 100 villages believed she could speak to the gods, because belief in a world without writing and without law is the only authority that actually works. They need a bridge again. Thud, thud, faint from the south. Feel the weight of that decision settling into the room. It is not a comfortable decision. It is not a confident decision. It is the decision of people who have run out of other options and are hoping, with the specific, exhausted hope of people who have been hoping for a long time, that this will work. A messenger is sent to the eastern room. Scuff, scuff, knock, pause. The girl looks up from her mirror. The messenger bows. His words are formal, the language of the court, the careful vocabulary of official communication that smooths even the most extraordinary requests into something that sounds almost ordinary. The council requests your presence. She sets the mirror down. She stands. Her movements are slow and deliberate, the movements of someone who has been practicing deliberateness for as long as she can remember. She smooths the front of her robe with both hands. She breathes in. She breathes out. She walks toward the door. Inhale, and the corridor opens before her. Exhale, and the footsteps begin. Listen to her footsteps on the cedar floor. They are lighter than the footsteps of the officials, quicker, but no less deliberate. The footsteps of someone young enough that the weight of the world has not yet had time to slow her down, but trained enough that she moves through the palace with the specific, unhurried grace of someone who understands that, in certain rooms, the quality of your arrival matters as much as the content of anything you might say. She enters the council chamber. The men look at her. She is small. She is 13. In the flickering light of the oil lamps, her face is very calm. Not the calm of someone who is unafraid, the calm of someone who has been practicing not showing their fear for long enough that the practice has become indistinguishable from the real thing. She sits down on the mat that has been placed for her at the center of the room. She places her hands in her lap. She waits. The old man speaks. He explains what is being asked. His words are careful and formal and take a long time to say something that can be summarized very briefly. We need you to be the queen. She does not respond immediately. The lamps tremble. Somewhere, very faint, the drums from the south continue their low, patient conversation with the earth. She breathes in. She breathes out. And then she says the only thing she can say, the only thing that is true, the only thing that is available to a 13-year-old girl who has been trained since childhood to be a vessel, and who understands, in the deep, pre-verbal part of her that is older than language, that this is what the training was for. Yes. Sink down into the lamplit council chamber. Sink down into the weight of that single word and the silence that follows it. The officials are exhaling around her, the collective release of men who have been holding a very complicated breath for a very long time. The drums are still sounding in the south. The palace is still full of its uncertain, directionless footsteps. And the girl who just said yes is sitting very still in the center of the room, her hands in her lap, her face calm, already beginning the long, slow work of becoming what she has agreed to be. Just breathe. Just rest. The council is adjourning. The decision has been made. And Iyo is sitting with the weight of it, quietly, the way she has been taught to sit with everything. Listen. Listen to the sound of a palace rearranging itself around a new center. It happens slowly, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of small adjustments, small redirections, small shifts in the direction of footsteps and the angle of bows and the quality of attention paid to a particular room at the end of a particular corridor. The palace is an organism. It has been organized around the presence of a queen before, and it knows, in the particular way that institutions know things, how to do it again. The maidens who served Himiko have been reassigned, those of them who remain. They are moving back into their positions along the inner corridors, their robes freshly changed, their footsteps finding again the synchronized, deliberate rhythm that the presence of an oracle seems to call out of them without any specific instruction. Swish, swish, swish. The silk is moving through the cedar-scented air of the palace, like water finding its old channels after a long, dry season. Iyo is in the inner chamber now, the chamber that was Himiko's. She is sitting in the center of the room, in the same position she has been practicing since she was old enough to hold the position. Spine straight, hands in her lap. Eyes open, but unfocused. The room around her is the same room it has always been. The same cedar walls. The same high, smoke-darkened rafters. The same smell of old incense and cool mineral air, and the particular, resinous warmth of cedar that has been absorbing the smoke of ritual fires for generations. But the room feels different now. Or perhaps she feels different in the room. Creak. Settle. Creak. Listen to the sound of the palace timbers as they cool in the night air. The cedar is old and seasoned, its fibers dense and slow-moving, and as the temperature drops, it contracts by fractions of millimeters, releasing a series of soft, almost inaudible groans. Creak. Settle. Creak. It is a sound she has heard all her life, the nighttime voice of the building that has always surrounded her, but tonight it sounds different. Tonight it sounds like the palace is speaking directly to her, acknowledging her presence, settling itself around her new position the way a heavy blanket settles around the specific shape of a specific body. She breathes in. She breathes out. She's trying to feel whether anything has changed, whether being named the Queen, sitting in this room, being surrounded by the slow reorganization of the palace around her presence, has altered something in the quality of her inner silence. Whether the frequency she has been practicing, the emptiness she has been cultivating since childhood, has shifted in response to the weight that was placed in her hands this afternoon. She is not sure. Inhale, and the cedar breathes around her. Exhale, and the night deepens. Outside the palace walls, the plain is dark and quiet. The drums from the south have stopped, at least for tonight. The villages are sleeping, or not sleeping, their inhabitants lying in the dark with the same question she has been sitting with all evening. What comes next? The same question that does not have an answer yet. The same question that will have to be answered slowly, through the accumulation of small moments, through the quality of presence she is able to bring to each morning, each decision, each time the oracle is consulted and she is the oracle. A small sound from the corridor outside. Scuff. Pause. Scuff. One of the maidens. Moving through her nighttime round of the inner corridors, her footsteps soft and deliberate and perfectly habitual. She passes the door of the inner chamber without pausing. She does not know yet, in the full embodied way that repetition teaches, that the room she just passed contains a new queen. That knowledge will come slowly, over days and weeks, as the pattern of the palace reforms itself around the new center. But Iyo heard her, and something in the sound of those footsteps passing outside the door, the simple, ordinary, utterly unremarkable sound of a person doing their job in the nighttime quiet of the palace, settles something in her. Something that has been unsettled since the messenger knocked on the door of the eastern room. Something that needed to hear exactly that. The ordinary continuing. The palace breathing. The footsteps moving in their soft, deliberate rhythm through the cedar-scented dark. She breathes in. She breathes out. She lets her eyes close. The first night of the Queen is very quiet. It is not triumphant. It is not ceremonial. It is not what you would expect the beginning of a reign to sound like, if you were expecting something that sounds like a beginning. It sounds like a girl breathing in a dark room. It sounds like cedar settling in the cool night air. It sounds like footsteps passing in a corridor. It sounds like the distant, barely perceptible whisper of the wind across the Yamatai plain. Shh. Shh. And somewhere much further away, almost at the edge of hearing, the faint, patient sound of 100 villages settling into their own uncertain sleep. Sink down into the first night of the Queen. Sink down into the cedar dark and the settling timbers and the soft, deliberate footsteps of the maiden passing in the corridor. The world outside is complicated and unresolved and full of the low, patient drums of conflicts that have not yet decided what they will become. But in here, in this room, there is only the breathing. In, out, in, out. The oracle is practicing. The Queen is learning her room. And the palace is settling, slowly, around its new center. Good night. Just breathe. The night will hold you. And the cedar remembers every queen. Listen. Listen to the sound of a new day arriving before anyone is ready for it. The light comes in through the gaps in the cedar planks the way it always has. Thin, grey, unhurried. The particular light of a morning that does not know and does not care what happened the day before. It falls across the packed earth of the floor, across the woven rush mats, across the hands of a girl who has been sitting in this room for most of the night and has not slept. She did not try to sleep. Sleeping felt wrong somehow, like leaving a post before the watch was over, even though no one had told her what the watch was or when it would end. So she sat, and the night passed around her the way nights do, slowly at first, and then all at once. Creak, settle, creak. The palace is waking up. She can hear it in the quality of the footsteps in the outer corridors. The nighttime footsteps are slow and widely spaced, the footsteps of people moving through darkness with care. The morning footsteps are different, more purposeful, closer together. The rhythm of people who have things to do and are beginning to remember what they are. Scuff, scuff, murmur, scuff. She listens to them without moving. Her hands are still in her lap. Her spine is still straight, though it costs her more now than it did last night. The muscles along her lower back have been making quiet complaints for the past hour. Small, insistent messages that she has been receiving and setting aside with the same patient discipline she applies to everything. This is the first thing she learns about being queen, that the body continues to have its own requirements, that the lower back does not suspend its complaints out of respect for political circumstances. She almost smiles. Inhale, and the morning light thickens. Exhale, and the palace stirs. The first maiden enters without knocking. This is protocol. The inner chamber is not a private space in the way that ordinary rooms are private. It is a ritual space, and the maidens who tend it move through it according to patterns established long before Iyo was born. The maiden is perhaps 30, her face composed and professional, her movements the movements of someone who has been performing this specific sequence of morning tasks for years and could perform them in complete darkness. She does not look at Iyo directly. This is also protocol. The oracle is not looked at directly. The oracle is attended to, cared for, arranged around, but not looked at, not met in the eyes. The gaze of the oracle is a tool of the ritual, not a feature of ordinary social interaction. Iyo watches the maiden work, the relighting of the small oil lamp in the corner, the straightening of the silk curtains that frame the inner doorway, the placement of a ceramic bowl of water and a folded cloth for washing. Each action precise, unhurried, performed with the quality of attention that turns an ordinary task into something that sits at the edge of ceremony. She wonders if the maiden knows, if the news of yesterday's council has reached the outer corridors yet. From the expression on the maiden's face, which is professionally neutral in the way that only years of practice can make a face neutral, it is impossible to say. The maiden finishes. She bows. She leaves. Scuff, swish, gone. Iyo reaches for the bowl of water. She washes her face with slow, deliberate movements, the cold water against her skin, the first fully physical sensation of the morning, the first thing to break through the particular numbness that a sleepless night in a straight-backed position produces. It is shocking and clarifying and good. She breathes in the cool mineral smell of the water. She breathes out. She is still here. The room is still here. The palace is waking up around her. The plain outside is beginning its ordinary day. She puts down the cloth. She straightens her spine again. She places her hands in her lap. The queen is ready for the morning. Or she is going to behave as though she is, which she understands already is the same thing. Sink down into the grey morning light of the inner chamber. Sink down into the smell of the water and the sound of the waking palace, and the quiet, exhausted, entirely unspectacular determination of a girl who did not sleep and is ready anyway. The day is beginning. The weight is already there, sitting in her hands. Familiar now in the way that something very heavy becomes familiar when you have been holding it for long enough that you have stopped noticing the strain. Just breathe. The morning will ask its questions soon enough, and she will answer them the way she answers everything, one breath at a time. Listen. Listen to the sound of the ordinary work of holding a world together. It is not a glamorous sound. It is not the sound of oracles pronouncing from behind silk curtains, or bronze mirrors vibrating with the frequency of the spirit world, or the dramatic, subharmonic chanting of the Kido ritual, filling the great hall with the smoke of cedar and mugwort. Those things exist, and we will come to them. But the daily weight of the crown is made of simpler, less theatrical materials. It is made of meetings, scuff, bow, murmur, pause, murmur, bow, scuff. The officials come in the morning, one after another, in the order established by protocol. The senior administrator of the grain stores first, then the commander of the outer guard, then the representative of the nearest tributary chiefdom, who has travelled for 2 days to deliver his community's seasonal report in person, because the new queen has been installed and the personal visit is a political necessity. Then the official responsible for the condition of the roads between the Yamatai and its 5 nearest allied settlements. Each of them delivers their information to the brother, who receives it in the outer corridor and carries it through the silk curtain to the inner chamber, where Iyo sits and listens. The same arrangement that served Himiko, the same architecture of mediation, the same careful, deliberate separation of the oracle from the world that keeps the oracle's authority intact. The brother's voice is low and practiced. He has been trained for this role as carefully as she has been trained for hers. His delivery is measured, unhurried, stripped of editorial comment. He presents the information the way the oracle presents its responses, as fact, as what is, without the particular distortions that urgency and fear and ambition introduce into the transmission of information. The grain stores are at 60% of their seasonal capacity. 2 sections of the northern road have been damaged by last month's rains and require attention before the harvest transport begins. The commander of the outer guard requests additional personnel for the southern perimeter. The representative of the Kasuga settlement has brought tribute and asks in the formal language of the court for the new queen's blessing on this season's planting. She listens. She processes. She responds. Not immediately, not quickly. The response of the oracle is never quick. Quickness would undermine the authority of the response, would make it seem reactive rather than considered, human rather than divine. She takes her time. She breathes. She allows the silence to do the work that silence is uniquely qualified to do, which is to make everything that follows it seem more significant than it would if it arrived in ordinary time. Inhale, and the information settles. Exhale, and the response forms. The grain situation requires monitoring, but not alarm. The road repairs should be organized immediately, before the harvest season makes the timing critical. The southern perimeter request should be granted, and the representative of the Kasuga settlement should be received with full honors, and his tribute acknowledged with a gift from the palace stores. She delivers these responses to the brother in a low, even voice. He receives them without comment. He carries them back through the curtain to the waiting officials. This is the work. This is the actual, daily, unglamorous, absolutely essential work of the oracle. Not the great rituals. Not the bone reading and the mirror gazing and the resonant subharmonic chanting. This, the processing of information, the making of decisions, the maintenance of the relationships that hold the network together. Performed from behind a silk curtain, in a carefully calibrated silence, by a 13-year-old girl who did not sleep last night, and whose lower back is still making its quiet complaints. Feel the weight of it. Not as a burden exactly, more like the weight of the earth itself, which is enormous and constant and does not fluctuate, and which you stop noticing after a while, not because it has lessened, but because you have adjusted, because your bones have found a way to carry it that is sustainable, because the weight has become, simply, the condition of standing. Thud, thud, faint, from the south. The drums are there again today. Quieter than yesterday. Or perhaps she is already beginning to learn to place them at the correct distance in her awareness. Close enough to monitor, far enough not to let them disrupt the quality of the attention she needs to give to the grain stores, the road repairs, the southern perimeter, the representative of the Kasuga settlement who has travelled 2 days to receive a blessing from a queen who is 13 years old and did not sleep last night. She gives the blessing. She gives it with the same quality of presence she would give to anything else, without reserve, without irony, without the particular self-consciousness that might make a different 13-year-old in different circumstances feel fraudulent. She gives it because it is being asked for, and because she understands already that the value of a blessing has very little to do with the certainty of the one who gives it. It has to do with the quality of the attention, with the willingness to be fully present in the act of giving, with the understanding that the person receiving the blessing needs it, and that the need itself is sufficient reason to give it well. The representative of the Kasuga settlement receives it. He bows. He leaves. His footsteps fade down the outer corridor and through the great gate, and onto the road that will carry him back, over 2 days of walking, to the settlement that sent him. He will tell them the blessing was given. He will tell them the new queen has presence. He will tell them in the particular way that people who have been briefly near something unusual try to describe it to those who are not there. That there is something about her. That the room felt right. That the silence felt right. That will be enough. For now, that will be enough. Sink down into the morning of meetings. Sink down into the low, practiced voice of the brother and the murmur of the officials in the outer corridor, and the distant, patient drums, and the grain stores at 60%, and the road repairs, and the southern perimeter, and the blessing given carefully and well by someone who is learning, one meeting at a time, what the crown actually weighs. Just breathe. Just rest. The meetings are finishing. The afternoon is coming, and the weight is already, almost imperceptibly, beginning to feel like something that can be carried. Listen. Listen to the sound of a practice becoming a life. The days are passing now. Not quickly. Time in the inner chamber of the Yamatai does not pass quickly. It moves with the same deliberate, seasonal rhythm as the plane outside, measured not in minutes, but in the quality of the light as it shifts through the gaps in the cedar planks, in the temperature of the morning water, in the changing pitch of the wind as the season turns. 1 week, 2, a month, and something is happening. Something that does not have a dramatic moment of arrival. No single morning when she wakes and understands that it has occurred. It happens the way the grass grows on the slope of a mound, slowly, and then it is simply there, and you cannot say exactly when it arrived. She is becoming the queen. Swish, swish, swish. Listen to the sound of the silk curtains as the brother passes through them. She has been listening to this sound dozens of times a day for weeks now, and it is beginning to carry information. The specific quality of the swish when the brother is carrying urgent news versus routine reports. The slight hesitation in his step when what he is about to deliver is something difficult. The barely perceptible acceleration when the news is good. She is learning to read the silk the way Himiko read the cracks in the oracle bones. Not with her eyes, with the whole of her attention. This is the education that no one planned for her, and no one is explicitly providing. It is arriving through the accumulated experience of being present, day after day, in the same room, with the same patterns of information flowing through the same channels. The world is teaching her its own structure. She is learning it the way you learn a language you live inside. Not by studying its rules, but by absorbing its rhythms until they become indistinguishable from your own. Creak. Settle. Creak. The palace at night has become familiar to her in a way it was not before. The specific sequence of sounds as the building cools. The particular creak of the third timber from the left in the ceiling, which always comes first, before anything else, when the temperature drops below a certain point. The way the wind sounds different when it is coming from the north versus the south. The way the distant drums, when they sound, have a slightly different quality depending on which direction they are coming from and how far away they are. She is building a map. Not a map of the land, though she is learning that too through the reports of the officials and the accounts of the messengers. A map of the texture of her world. A sensory, intuitive, deeply personal map of the specific environment she now inhabits, built from the accumulated experience of paying attention to it, hour by hour, day by day, in the particular receptive quality of awareness that her training has given her. Inhale, and the palace speaks. Exhale, and she listens. One evening, perhaps 6 weeks after the day of the council, something shifts. She is sitting in the inner chamber in the late light of the afternoon, the usual meetings finished, the brother withdrawn to his own quarters, the maidens moving through their evening routines in the outer corridors. The light through the cedar planks is the particular amber of late afternoon, the warmest light of the day, the light that makes the cedar walls glow as if they are generating their own heat. The palace is quiet, and she becomes aware, in a way she has not been aware before, of a quality in the silence. Not the absence of sound, the presence of something. The same frequency that she has been practicing reaching for since she was old enough to practice anything. The frequency that the training calls the voice of the kami. The resonance of the spirit world vibrating just below the threshold of ordinary hearing. She has touched it before, in training sessions, in moments of particularly deep meditation, but always as something she was reaching toward, always as something at the edge of her practice, just past the boundary of her current capability. Tonight, it is simply there. Not dramatic, not overwhelming. Not the way the stories describe it, with the smoke and the fire and the bone cracking in the coals. Just a quality of presence in the room. A deepening of the silence into something that has texture and weight. A sense of the palace around her as a living thing, not just metaphorically but actually. The cedar and the earth and the silk and the smoke of the old ritual fires, all breathing together in a frequency that she can feel in her sternum and the soles of her feet. She breathes in. She breathes out. She stays very still. She does not reach for it. She has learned, finally, that reaching for it is the thing that makes it go. She simply allows it to be there. She makes herself as empty and as quiet and as receptive as she knows how to make herself. And it stays. The sound is almost inaudible, almost below the threshold of sound entirely. More vibration than noise. The kind of frequency you feel before you hear it. But it is there, and she knows what it is. She has been preparing to know what it is for as long as she can remember. This is the thing that Himiko had. This is the thing the 100 villages believe in. This is the thing that stops wars and settles disputes and makes the grain stores full and the roads passable and the distant chiefdoms willing to send their tribute across 2 days of walking to receive a blessing from a girl who did not sleep and whose lower back makes its complaints known. It is not magic, or it is not only magic. It is also this: the willingness to be still enough and quiet enough and empty enough that the world can use you as a receiver, that the frequency of the land can move through you without being interrupted by the noise of your own wanting. She sits with it until the light has gone entirely and the chamber is dark except for the small oil lamp in the corner. She sits with it until the evening footsteps of the maidens have settled into the slower, quieter rhythm of the night watch. She sits with it until the amber warmth has faded from the cedar walls and the air has taken on the cool, mineral quality of the deep night. Then she breathes out. One long, slow, releasing breath, and lets the day go. Sink down into the amber evening of the inner chamber. Sink down into the particular quality of that silence and the frequency that moved through it, and the girl sitting in the center of it, neither holding on nor letting go, simply present. The palace is quiet. The plain is dark. The drums are still. And somewhere in the cedar and the smoke and the dark, the world is holding its new queen in the only way it knows how to hold things. Carefully, quietly, without asking her to be anything other than what she already is. Good night. Just breathe. The silk is still. The cedar remembers, and the silence is keeping you. Listen. Listen to the sound of a practice older than the palace that contains it. It begins before dawn, always before dawn. The sky outside the cedar walls is still the deep, absolute indigo of the hours before the light has made up its mind to arrive, and the palace is in the particular stillness that belongs exclusively to that time. Not the stillness of sleep exactly, the stillness of a world that is between states, between the night which is ending and the day which is not yet committed to beginning. The in-between time, the threshold time, the time that the training calls the hour of the open door. This is when she practices. She has been doing this since long before the council named her queen. The practice existed before she did, in a sense. It was handed to her by the elder who trained her, who received it from the elder who trained that elder, who received it in turn from a lineage of practitioners that extends back far enough that the beginning of it is not recoverable. The practice is older than the Yamatai, older than the mounds, older than the rice. It belongs to the long, unwritten tradition of people who learned, through patient trial and accumulated experience, how to make themselves quiet enough to hear what the world was saying underneath the noise. She sits. She breathes. She begins. Inhale. Slow. All the way. Filling. Filling. Exhale. Slow. All the way. Emptying. Emptying. The breathing is the foundation, not because the breathing itself is the practice, but because the quality of attention required to breathe this slowly and this deliberately is the same quality of attention required for everything that follows. It is a training of the awareness, a way of teaching the mind to stay in one place without being pulled toward the past or the future, or the thousand small anxieties that ordinary life generates continuously and automatically. The cedar walls creak once, settle, are still. The oil lamp in the corner burns with a flame that is barely moving, the air in the pre-dawn chamber so still that the flame is almost perfectly vertical, a thin, unwavering needle of orange light that casts almost no shadow because there is almost nothing to interrupt it. She watches it without watching it. It is in her peripheral awareness, a point of reference, a small, steady constant against which the movements of her own mind become visible. Her mind moves. Of course it moves. The mind always moves. A thought about the morning's meetings. A thought about the drums in the south, which have been quieter this week but have not stopped entirely. A thought about the grain stores, still at 60%, the number sitting in the corner of her awareness like a pebble in a sandal. A thought about the representative of the northern chiefdom who is arriving tomorrow and whose political loyalties are, according to the brothers' briefings, genuinely uncertain. She notices each thought. She does not follow it. She returns each time to the breath. In, out. The flame. The cedar. The pre-dawn stillness of the in-between time. This returning is the practice, not the absence of thought, the returning. Scuff. Silence. Scuff. A maiden passes in the outer corridor. The sound of her footsteps arrives, crosses the space of awareness, and fades. Iyo notices it the way she notices the thoughts, without following, without resistance. The footsteps are simply there, and then they are not, and the silence resumes, and the breath continues, and the flame burns its narrow vertical line against the dark. Inhale, and the in-between deepens. Exhale, and the mind settles. Time passes in a different way during the practice. Not the ordinary, forward-moving time of meetings and meals and the rotation of the guard. A different kind of time, more lateral than linear. The kind of time in which a single breath can feel as long as a morning, and an entire hour can pass with the lightness of a single breath. She has never been able to explain this to anyone who has not experienced it, and she has stopped trying. Some things are not available to description. They are only available to experience. The sky outside the cedar walls is beginning to change, imperceptibly at first. The absolute indigo of the deep night beginning to thin at its edges, to lighten by a fraction of a degree towards something that is not yet blue, but is no longer quite black. The birds in the cedar grove at the edge of the compound are beginning their first tentative experiments with the morning. A single note. Silence. 2 notes. Silence. A brief, questioning phrase that trails off without committing to an answer. She listens to the birds the way she listens to everything in this hour, with the specific, non-grasping attention that the practice teaches. The birds are there. She is here. The cedar walls are between them. This arrangement is complete in itself and requires no addition. And then, Between one breath and the next, it is there again. The frequency. Not a sound exactly. A quality of the silence rather than a break in it. The same presence she felt in the amber evening 6 weeks ago, but different now. Deeper. More stable. Less like a visitation and more like a recognition. As if the frequency was always there and she is simply, today, quiet enough to notice it. As if the practice has been building all these weeks, not toward a destination, but toward a clearing. A removing of the noise that was in the way. She does not move toward it. She does not move away. She simply breathes and allows the frequency to be what it is, and waits to see if it has anything to say. It does not speak. Not in words. Not in the kind of communication that can be transcribed and delivered through a silk curtain by the brother. It speaks the way the plain speaks, the way the mountains speak, the way the slow, tectonic breathing of the earth speaks. In texture, in pressure, in the quality of the air and the weight of the silence and the particular, unmistakable sense that something very old and very patient is simply, for this moment, aware of her. The birds in the cedar grove are singing now, properly singing. The full, layered morning chorus of a grove that has been waking to the dawn for 1,000 years. The light through the cedar planks is unmistakably grey now, the grey of beginning, the grey of the world resuming its ordinary brightness after the long dark. The practice is ending. The in-between time is closing. The day is arriving with its meetings and its grain stores and its drums from the south and its uncertain northern chieftain. She breathes in one last time, long, all the way, filling the body completely, and then out, all the way, returning everything to the morning. She opens her eyes. The flame of the oil lamp has grown slightly more visible in the grey light of the dawn, though it is burning no brighter than it was. The cedar walls are the same walls they always are. The floor, the ceiling, the silk curtains, the familiar smell of old incense and mineral air. Everything is the same. And something, this morning, is different. Sink down into the pre-dawn practice of the inner chamber. Sink down into the breathing and the flame and the in-between time and the frequency that lives in the silence underneath everything. The birds are singing. The day is arriving. And the Queen has been in conversation with something very old and very patient. A conversation that uses no words and leaves no record and changes everything anyway. Just breathe. Just rest. The practice continues, and the silence remembers every morning. Listen. Listen to the sound of the old knowledge being passed on. There is an elder in the palace. She has been here for longer than most people can remember, long enough that her presence has become a feature of the building rather than a person within it, the way a large stone becomes a feature of a landscape after enough years. Her name is not used. She is referred to by the maidens and the officials and even the brother simply as the elder. The definite article is important. Not an elder, the elder. as if the category contains only one member, which, for practical purposes, it does. She was one of Himiko's teachers, and before that she was a student of the teacher who taught Himiko's teacher. She carries, in her body and her memory, a lineage of practice that is deeper than the Yamatai, deeper than the oracle tradition as it is currently understood, reaching back to the time before the silk curtains, and the formal protocol, and the 1,000 maidens, and all the elaborate architecture of the divine feminine authority that the Yamatai has built around its oracle. She is very old, and she has been watching Iyo. Tap, tap, tap. Her walking stick on the cedar floor of the corridor. Slow but not weak, deliberate. The tap of someone who is choosing each footstep rather than simply making it. Iyo has been hearing this sound for weeks, the elder moving through the outer corridors in her irregular, unhurried pattern, never asking for access to the inner chamber, never sending word through the brother, simply present in the building in the way that the building itself is present. Today the tapping stops outside the inner chamber door. Tap, 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 stop. Silence. And then, without announcement, without the formal knock of protocol, the door slides open. The elder enters. She moves through the inner chamber with the particular confidence of someone who has been in this room more times than they can count, in a different arrangement, with a different queen. She does not bow. She sits down on the mat across from Iyo, with the careful, deliberate movement of very old joints, cooperating with a request that is within their capability, but not within their comfort. She looks at Iyo directly. This is startling. No one looks at the oracle directly. Protocol is explicit on this point. The oracle is not to be met in the eyes. The elder has apparently decided that this particular protocol does not apply to her. Her eyes are dark and very clear, the clarity of very old eyes that have seen enough that they have stopped being surprised by anything and have arrived, on the other side of surprise, at a quality of attention that is simply, steadily, entirely present. She says nothing for a long moment. She is reading Iyo the way Iyo reads the silk curtains, with the whole of her attention, without rushing toward a conclusion. Inhale, and the room holds. Exhale, and the assessment continues. Then she speaks. Her voice is lower than expected for her size, a resonant, unhurried voice that seems to arrive from somewhere deeper than the throat. She does not speak of the frequency, or the pre-dawn practice, or the quality of the silence in the amber evening. She speaks of the bone, the futomani, the oracle bone, the shoulder blade of a deer, placed in the fire until it cracks, and the cracks read for their meaning. Iyo knows this practice in theory. It is part of the tradition she has been trained in, but she has never done it. The training approached it, but did not complete it. There was a sense, never explicitly stated, that the completion was something that would happen when it was time, and that the time would make itself known. The elder says, "It is time." She produces from the folds of her robe a shoulder blade, small, smooth, perfectly cleaned. She places it on the mat between them without ceremony. Then a small ceramic brazier, already lit, its coals glowing a deep, steady orange. She says, "Watch first, then do." She takes the bone. She holds it over the brazier with a steadiness that the hands of the very old do not always have. The steadiness of a specific skill maintained by decades of practice, rather than by the general cooperation of the body. The bone above the heat, not touching the coals, just close enough to feel them. The sound begins almost immediately. A low, barely audible creaking. The bone responding to the heat the way the cedar timbers respond to the cooling night air. Not cracking yet, just speaking, announcing itself, making its presence in the heat known in the only language available to it. Creak, settle, creak. Iyo watches without moving. Her eyes are on the bone, but her attention is broader than her eyes. She is watching the elder's hands, the angle of the bone over the heat, the quality of the smoke rising from the brazier, the specific orange of the coals, and the way the heat is distributed across the surface of the bone, and the particular building quality of the sound as the temperature inside the bone rises toward the moment of the crack. And then, crack. Sharp, crystalline, a sound like a small, clear bell, struck once and allowed to ring until the ring becomes silence. A sound that seems disproportionate to the size of the object that produced it, too clear and too decisive for something this small, as if the sound came not from the bone, but from somewhere else entirely, as if the bone was only the instrument and the music came from further away. The elder lowers the bone. She holds it in both hands and reads it. Her eyes move over the crack with the same quality of attention she brought to reading Iyo's face. Unhurried, without reaching toward a conclusion, simply receiving what is there. She speaks quietly. What she says is for Iyo alone. We will not record it here. Some things are not available to recording. They are only available to the relationship in which they occur. Inhale, and the crack speaks. Exhale, and the reading settles. Then she places the bone on the mat in front of Iyo. She places a second bone beside it, uncracked. She places the brazier between them. She says, "Now you." Iyo picks up the bone. It is cool and smooth in her hands, lighter than it looks. She holds it over the brazier. Her hands are steadier than she expected. The heat rises against her palms. The coal smell fills the lower part of the room. She breathes in the smoke. She breathes out. She waits. The bone begins to speak. The low, preliminary creak of a material approaching transformation. She listens to it with the whole of her attention, the same quality of attention she has been practicing in the pre-dawn hour, the same non-grasping awareness that allows the frequency to be present without being chased away by the reaching. And she realizes something. The bone is not going to crack in a place she chooses. She cannot direct it. She cannot decide where the crack will go. Her role is not to make the crack, but to receive it. Her role is to hold the bone at the right angle, in the right heat, with the right quality of attention. And then, to allow what happens to happen, and to be present enough, and quiet enough, and still enough to read what it says. This is the oracle, not magic, not performance, not the wielding of a power that belongs to her. The willingness to hold something over the fire and wait and be quiet and receive what arrives, and then translate it with the most honesty and the most care she is capable of. Crack. She looks at the bone. She reads it. She does not know, yet, how to read it the way the elder reads it, with decades of accumulated pattern recognition and embodied knowledge. But she reads what she can, and she speaks what she reads, and the elder listens, and nods, and says nothing, which is the only form of confirmation available from someone who has decided that you are ready. The brazier cools, the smoke thins, the bones lie on the mat between them, cracked, red, finished. Tap, tap, tap. The elder stands, slowly, carefully, with the unhurried dignity of someone who has been standing up from mats for 7 decades and has made peace with the amount of time it requires. She looks at Iyo one more time. That same direct, clear, entirely present gaze. Then she turns and walks to the door. Tap, tap, tap. And she is gone. Iyo sits with the cracked bones on the mat in front of her. The brazier is cooling. The coal smell is fading into the ordinary cedar and incense smell of the inner chamber. She breathes in. She breathes out. She held the bone over the fire. She waited. She received what arrived. She read it with the best honesty she had. She is beginning to understand what being the oracle means. Not the ceremony of it, the actual substance of it. And it is both simpler and harder than she expected. Simpler because it is essentially just this: presence, attention, honesty. Harder because presence and attention and honesty are the 3 things that are most difficult to sustain under the pressure of a world that is continuously asking for something else. Sink down into the smoke-fading quiet of the inner chamber. Sink down into the cooling brazier and the cracked bones and the cedar walls that have absorbed this particular lesson many times before. The elder is in the corridor. The morning is continuing. And Iyo is sitting with the knowledge that has just been placed in her hands, holding it, the way she holds everything, carefully, without rushing, one breath at a time. Just breathe. Just rest. The bones have spoken, and the fire remembers every crack. Listen. Listen to the sound of understanding arriving sideways. It is evening, several weeks after the lesson with the bone and the fire. The palace is in its nighttime configuration. The corridors quiet, the outer gate closed. The guard changed for the last time before dawn. Iyo is sitting in the inner chamber, as she always is at this hour, but tonight she is not practicing. Or she is, but not in the deliberate, structured way of the pre-dawn hour. Tonight she is simply sitting, without method, without intention, without the particular, organized quality of attention that the practice requires. She is tired. The kind of tired that accumulates not from physical exertion, but from the sustained effort of being present all day in a world that makes continuous demands on the quality of your presence. The meetings, the decisions, the careful, minute-by-minute calibration of authority and accessibility, of being available and being protected, of saying enough and not too much, of receiving the information that comes through the silk curtain and responding to it in a way that is neither too quick nor too slow, neither too human nor too oracular. She is tired, and she has stopped trying to be anything in particular. She is just here, in this room, in this body, in this specific tiredness. Creak, settle, creak. The cedar is speaking in its nighttime way. The oil lamp is burning. The silk curtains are still. The plain outside is dark and quiet. Nothing is happening. Nothing is required. She is looking at the mirror in her lap, the small personal one she has had since before the council. Its surface dim in the lamplight, the reflection it gives back vague and slightly warped. She is not looking into it with any particular intention. She is just looking at it the way you look at something familiar when you are too tired to look at anything that requires effort. And something occurs to her. Inhale, and the thought arrives. Exhale, and she follows it slowly. The mirror does not try to reflect. It does not make an effort. It does not practice reflecting. It simply has the quality of being able to reflect. And when light arrives, the reflecting happens. Without intention, without effort. Without the mirror doing anything at all except being what it is. This is the thing the practice has been moving toward. The thing that the pre-dawn breathing and the bone and the fire and the weekly lessons with the elder have been building, not by adding something, but by removing something, by removing the effort, by removing the trying, by building, through the sustained discipline of practice, the capacity to be present without working at being present, the capacity to reflect without trying to reflect. She has been thinking of the oracle as something she does, as a performance, as a skill she is developing. And it is those things. But it is also, underneath those things, something simpler. It is something she is. Not because she is special, not because she was chosen by the gods or born with a gift that others lack, but because she has been willing to sit in the room day after day and breathe and be still and return again and again to the quality of attention that the practice asks for. Because she has been willing to be empty enough and quiet enough and patient enough that when the light arrives, the reflecting can happen without her getting in the way. The mirror in her lap, the small, dim, personal mirror with its tarnished surface and its slightly warped reflection. She looks at it for a long time, not thinking, just looking. The lamp burning its narrow, quiet line. The cedar breathing its slow, tectonic breath. The plain outside dark and patient. The frequency is there. Of course it is there. It is always there. She understands that now. It was always there, even in the weeks before she could feel it, even in the years of practice before the amber evening and the pre-dawn openings. It was there the whole time. She was simply too full of her own effort to notice it. She is not too full now. She is tired and still and empty in the good way, the earned way, the way that comes not from giving up, but from having worked hard enough and long enough that the working has become invisible, that the practice has sunk below the level of conscious effort and become simply the way she is in the world. The mirror reflects the lamplight, dim, warped, patient, doing exactly what it is capable of doing and nothing more, making no claims about the quality of its reflection, simply present, simply open, simply itself. She breathes in, she breathes out, she closes her eyes. This is the thing she could not be taught. This is the thing that the elder knew she would have to find for herself. That the practice is not the point. The practice is the path. The point is this specific, unremarkable, entirely unglamorous evening of being too tired to try, sitting with a dim mirror in a lamp-lit room, and finding, in the tiredness and the stillness, the thing that was there all along. The oracle is not performing. The oracle is receiving. The oracle is a mirror, dim and warped and imperfect and patient, holding itself open to whatever arrives, reflecting it as honestly as its surface allows, and trusting that honest reflection, however imperfect, is enough. She sits with this for a long time. The lamp burns. The cedar creaks. The plain breathes in the dark outside. Nothing changes, and everything has changed. And neither of those facts requires her to do anything about them. Sink down into the lamp-lit quiet of the evening chamber. Sink down into the dim mirror and the tired stillness and the frequency that was always there and the understanding that arrived not through effort, but through the exhaustion of effort. The practice is complete for tonight. The oracle is resting, and the mirror is doing what mirrors do, quietly, honestly, without trying. Good night. Just breathe. The lamp will burn until morning. The mirror remembers every light it has ever held, and the silence is keeping you. Listen. Listen to the sound of the plane when the peace has broken. It is not the sound you might expect. It is not the clashing of bronze or the shouting of armies or the dramatic, burning noise of a civilization at war with itself. It is quieter than that, more pervasive. the particular, distributed sound of 100 small decisions being made in the wrong direction. Each one individually too small to be catastrophic, collectively adding up to something that is. The grain deliveries from the southern chiefdoms have stopped. Not all of them. 3 of them. But 3 is enough to change the mathematics of the palace stores. And the mathematics of the palace stores is one of the primary languages in which political loyalty expresses itself. Grain is not just food. Grain is a statement. And the statement being made by the 3 southern chiefdoms is the oldest and the clearest statement available in this political vocabulary. We are not sure about you anymore. Thud. 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 The drums are louder now. Not from one direction, from 2. The south, as always, where the kingdom of Kunan has been restless since before Himiko died. And now from the east as well, a new rhythm, slightly different in its cadence, the particular percussion of a different community speaking the same restless language. Iyo hears them from the inner chamber. She has learned over these months to hear the drums the way the elder reads the cracked bone. Not just the fact of them, but the texture of them. The specific quality of the rhythm and the distance and the direction. The drums from the south today are more deliberate than they were last week. More organized. They have found a pattern that suggests coordination rather than individual agitation. Multiple communities, she understands, are beginning to move in the same direction at the same time. This is what the beginning of a serious conflict sounds like. Not a battle. Not yet. A rhythm. Scuff. Bow. Murmur. Pause. The brother enters through the silk curtain. His footsteps have the quality she has learned to read as urgency being carefully managed. The slight acceleration that he controls but cannot entirely conceal. He delivers his report in the measured, protocol-appropriate language of the court, but beneath the language, she can hear what he is not saying. The same way she hears the frequency beneath the ordinary silence of the chamber. 3 more chiefdoms in the eastern provinces have sent messengers not to the Yamatai, but to each other. The messengers were observed on the roads by the palace's network of informants. Their routes connected settlements that do not normally communicate directly. The content of the messages is not known, but the fact of them is significant enough. She receives this information without moving. She lets it settle into the quality of the silence before she responds. The brother waits. He is good at waiting. This is one of the qualities that makes him effective in his role. He understands that the silence of the oracle is not absence. It is process. Inhale, and the information settles. Exhale, and the understanding forms. She asks 2 questions. The first is about the grain stores. The second is about the condition of the roads in the eastern provinces, specifically the roads that connect the communicating chiefdoms to each other and to the Yamatai. The brother answers both. The grain stores are at 52%, down from 60% over the past month. The roads in the eastern provinces are good, recently maintained, which means the movement of people and messages between the eastern chiefdoms is easier than it would otherwise be. which means the coordination she is observing is not being impeded by geography, which means it can happen faster than the Yamatai's response to it. She nods. Once. The brother withdraws. She sits with this for a long time. The drums from the south. The coordinating messengers in the east. The falling grain stores. The mathematics of a world that is beginning to move in multiple directions simultaneously, none of them toward the center. This is the thing that killed the king. Not a single decisive defeat. The accumulation of small movements away from the center, each one individually dismissible, collectively amounting to the dissolution of the authority that held the network together. She is not going to let it happen again. But she does not yet know how to stop it. Breathe in the drum-heavy air of the late afternoon. Let the sound of the southern rhythm and the eastern coordination and the falling grain stores fill your awareness completely, not as a crisis, but as information. As the cracked bone, offering what it knows in the only language available to it. As the silk curtain, moving in the draft of a world that is restless and uncertain, and looking, whether it knows it or not, for a center to organize itself around. She breathes. The drums continue. The plain is troubled and patient and vast. And somewhere in the quality of the silence between the drum beats, she is beginning to hear the shape of what needs to happen. Sink down into the drum-filled afternoon. Sink down into the information and the silence between the information and the slow, careful understanding forming in the center of the inner chamber. The world is coming apart at its edges, and the oracle is listening to the sound of it with the same quality of attention she brings to everything. Patient, unafraid, present. Just breathe. Just rest. The drums are information, and the oracle is learning to read them. Listen. Listen to the sound of a long night of thinking. The palace is quiet. The drums have stopped for the evening, as they always do at this hour. The conflict outside pausing for the night, the way conflicts do, observing a kind of involuntary truce imposed by darkness and the human need for sleep. But in the inner chamber, the lamp is still burning. It has been burning since before the evening meal. It will burn until dawn. Iyo is not sleeping. She is not in her practice posture either. She is sitting differently tonight, more loosely, legs folded to one side, her weight resting on one hand flat against the mat, her body in the particular configuration of someone who is thinking rather than meditating. The thinking posture. The elder showed it to her once, years ago, and she has been using it privately since then. The body communicates to the mind what mode it is operating in. Meditation requires stillness, symmetry, the architecture of openness. Thinking requires something different, a slight looseness, a willingness to shift, to follow the thought wherever it goes without being pulled back again and again to the breath. She is thinking about the network. Creak, settle, creak. The network of the Yamatai is not a simple thing. It is not a wheel with the palace at the hub and the tributary chiefdoms as the spokes. It is more complicated than that, more organic, more like a web in which every node is connected to multiple other nodes, and the removal of any single connection changes the tension in every other connection simultaneously. The king failed because he treated it like a wheel, because he positioned himself at the hub and expected the spokes to remain in place simply because that was where they had been when Himiko was alive. But the spokes were not in place because of the hub. They were in place because of Himiko, because of the specific, unrepeatable quality of her authority. And when that authority was gone, and only the hub remained, the spokes found no particular reason to stay attached to it. She cannot be Himiko. She knows this. She is 13 years old, and she has been the queen for 4 months, and the drums are sounding from 2 directions, and the grain stores are at 52%. She cannot do what Himiko did. Not yet. Possibly not ever in the same way. Himiko was decades of accumulated practice and political relationship and the particular, irreplaceable authority of a specific person in a specific time. But she does not need to be Himiko. Inhale, and the thought clarifies. Exhale, and the shape emerges. What she needs to do is different. What she needs to do is remind the network of what it is. Not tell it what it is. Remind it. The distinction is important. Telling the network what it is would be the approach of the king, the approach of a hub insisting on the continued relevance of its spokes. Reminding the network of what it is something else entirely. It is showing the network its own best self, holding up the mirror, dim and warped and imperfect as it is, and allowing the network to see in it the reflection of something it already knows and has temporarily forgotten. The web is not broken. The connections are stressed, but not severed. The 3 southern chiefdoms have stopped sending grain, but they have not stopped sending messengers. The eastern chiefdoms are communicating with each other, which means they are still speaking the language of political relationship rather than the language of open conflict. The drums are the sound of restlessness, not the sound of armies. There is still time. She needs to make the center visible again. Not by asserting it, by embodying it, by doing something that can only be done from the center, that demonstrates the center's continued existence and legitimacy in a way that is so clear and so undeniable that the peripheral movements slow and stop and reorient toward it. She needs to make the Yamatai legible again. Tap, tap, tap. The elder's walking stick in the corridor outside. At this hour. The elder does not usually walk the corridors at this hour. Iyo does not call out. She waits. The door slides open. The elder enters. She sits down across from Iyo with the same careful, deliberate movement as always. She looks at Iyo with her clear, dark, entirely present eyes. She says nothing for a long moment. She is reading the room, the thinking posture, the lamp that has been burning for hours, the quality of the silence in the chamber, which is the silence of a mind that has been working hard and has arrived somewhere. She says, "You have decided something. It is not a question." Iyo says, "I think so." The elder waits. Iyo tells her, "Not everything. The parts that are clear. The parts that are still forming she leaves in silence, because the elder has taught her that the things still forming are not yet ready to be spoken, and that speaking them too early fixes them into a shape that may not be the right one. The elder listens. She nods once, twice. She says nothing that is disagreement. She says nothing that is approval either. She simply receives what is being offered and allows it to be what it is. Then she says, "The question is not what to do. The question is how to make them come." Iyo looks at her. This is, she realizes, exactly the right way to frame it. Not how to project authority outward toward the restless periphery. How to create the conditions in which the periphery moves toward the center of its own accord. How to make the center something that the peripheral chiefdoms want to be near, rather than something they are being required to orbit. The elder stands. Tap, tap, tap. She moves toward the door, pauses. She says, "The mirror does not chase the light." Then she is gone. Iyo sits with that for a long time. The lamp burning, the cedar breathing, the quiet of a palace that is sleeping around a queen who is not. The mirror does not chase the light. Breathe in the lamplit dark of the long night. Let the decision settle into the chamber the way the smoke of the brazier settles, slowly, finding the lower air and resting there. The thinking is done. The shape has emerged, and the queen who could not sleep is sitting with it quietly, turning it in her mind the way she turned the bone over the fire, waiting for the crack, waiting for the thing that is forming to become what it is. Just breathe, just rest. The night is long. The decision is made, and the mirror is ready. Listen. Listen to the sound of a war that did not happen. This is the hardest kind of history to hear. The history of the thing that did not occur. The battle that was not fought. The burning that was prevented. The 1,000 villages that did not send their young men into the mud of the paddies to kill each other over a political arrangement that no one fully understood and everyone depended on. The Chronicles of the Way record it in a single sentence. After Himiko died and the king failed and the troubles came, a girl named Iyo was installed as queen. And the troubles stopped. That is all. One sentence. No explanation. No description of what she did, or how she did it, or what it cost her. Just the flat, administrative fact of the ending. Troubles. Girl. Stopped. But something happened between those words. Something that the Chronicles did not record, because the Chronicles recorded events, and what happened was not exactly an event. It was a quality, a presence, a specific, deliberate, entirely unglamorous piece of work performed over several months by a 13-year-old girl who understood something that the king did not. Scuff, bow, murmur. The messengers began arriving at the Yamatai in the weeks after the long night of thinking. Not the ordinary rotation of tributary messengers, different messengers. From chiefdoms that had not communicated with the palace in months. From the 3 southern settlements that had stopped sending grain. From the eastern communities whose coordinating messengers had been observed on the roads. They came because they were invited, not commanded, invited. The language of the invitations was careful and specific. They were written by the brother in the formal vocabulary of the court, and they said something that invitations from the Yamatai had not said before. They did not request tribute. They did not assert authority. They requested the presence of the chieftains themselves, personally, at a gathering in the palace compound, for the purpose of consultation. Consultation. The word was chosen with precision. The Yamatai was not telling the chieftains what it had decided. The Yamatai was asking what the chieftains thought. This was new. Inhale, and the invitations travel. Exhale, and the plane waits. The chieftains came. Not all of them immediately. Some came quickly, curious and cautious, and trying not to show either. Some came slowly, taking their time, letting the invitations sit for a week before responding, which was itself a statement. The statement of people who wanted to confirm that they were coming of their own accord and not because they felt they had no choice. But they came. The gathering was held in the large hall of the palace compound. Not the inner chamber, not the ritual space of the oracle. The administrative hall, the practical space of the practical business of governance. The chieftains sat on mats arranged in a configuration that placed no one at a head and no one at a foot. A circle. Another deliberate choice. Iyo did not attend in person. The oracle does not appear in public. The oracle speaks through the brother, from behind the silk curtain. But the silk curtain, on this occasion, was positioned at the edge of the hall, rather than at the center of it, which meant that the voice from behind it was present in the room in a different way than it would have been in the formal audience arrangement. Less above, less separate, more alongside. The chieftains spoke. They spoke for a long time, about the grain, about the roads, about the conflicts between their own communities that the weakening of the central authority had allowed to resurface, about the fears and the grievances and the specific, local frustrations that had been building for months under the surface of the political restlessness that the drums expressed. She listened. From behind the silk curtain, in the posture of the oracle, breathing slowly and receiving everything that was being said with the quality of attention she had been practicing since before dawn every morning for the past year. She listened not for the arguments, but for the texture beneath the arguments. Not for what the chieftains were saying, but for what they were trying to say. The cracked bone of the political moment, offering its message in the only language available to it. What she heard surprised her, not in its content, in its uniformity. Every chieftain, speaking in their own dialect, from their own particular community, with their own specific grievances, was ultimately saying the same thing. We are afraid. Thud, thud, thud. Fading, fading, still. The drums had stopped. Not all at once. Gradually, over the weeks of the gathering process, as the invitations were sent, and the messengers travelled, and the chieftains began to move toward the palace. The drums stopped the way they had started, by increment, each settlement making its own individual decision that the moment for the drums had passed, and the cumulative effect of those individual decisions being the silence of the plain. She responded to what she had heard, through the brother, in the formal language of the oracle. But the content of the response was different from anything the Yamatai had said in the months since Himiko died. It did not assert, it did not command, it received. It said, "We hear you." It said, "The concerns are understood." It said, "The center is here, and the center is listening, and the center will not ask you to orbit something that does not acknowledge your existence." It said, in the old, careful language of the oracle, "You are part of the harmony." Not beneath it, part of it. And the harmony cannot exist without you. Inhale, and the hall is still. Exhale, and something releases. The chieftains left the gathering differently than they arrived. Not transformed, not converted, not suddenly and permanently loyal in a way they had not been before, but shifted, reoriented by a few degrees toward the center, the way a compass needle is reoriented by the proximity of something with a field. Not by force, by field. The grain deliveries resumed over the following months. Not all at once. One chiefdom, then another, then the third. Each resumption its own individual decision, made in the privacy of its own particular calculation of interest and loyalty, and the specific, local assessment of whether the Yamatai was something worth sending grain to. The drums did not return that season, or the next. The war that did not happen left no ruins, no burned villages, no fields left fallow because the men who would have worked them were lying in the mud of someone else's paddy. No orphaned children, no widows, no debt of grief between communities that might have been allies and instead became enemies and carried the memory of what was done between them for generations. The war that did not happen is the hardest history to see, because it is not there. It is the space where something was and chose not to be. The crack that did not form. The bone that held. But if you listen very carefully, in the quiet of the plain after the drums have stopped, you can almost hear it. The particular silence of a violence that turned around before it arrived. The specific quality of a morning that is ordinary because someone, somewhere, in a lamplit room in the middle of a sleepless night, made a decision that prevented it from being anything else. Sink down into the stopped drums. Sink down into the silence of the plain after the restlessness has passed. The grain is moving again on the roads between the settlements. The eastern chieftains are sending their ordinary, seasonal messengers. The gathering has dispersed. The chieftains are home. And the inner chamber of the Yamatai is quiet in the particular, specific, entirely unglamorous way of a place where someone did something important and then went back to their ordinary morning of breathing and stillness and the pre-dawn practice of being empty enough to receive. Good night. Just breathe. The war did not happen. The plain is quiet, and the oracle is resting, as she should be, as she has earned. Listen. Listen to the sound of the world arriving from very far away. It begins as a report, a single sentence delivered through the silk curtain by the brother, in his measured, unhurried voice, on an ordinary morning in the middle of an ordinary week. Ships have been sighted off the western coast. Large ships. The kind that cross open water rather than following the coastline. The kind that carry people who have come a very long distance and are not stopping somewhere along the way. The kind that come from the continent. She receives this information without moving. She lets it settle into the silence of the chamber, the way she lets everything settle. Ships from the continent, from the direction of the Korean peninsula, and behind that, the vast administrative machinery of the Great Way. The same empire that sent Himiko the Golden Seal. The same empire whose chronicles gave Iyo the handful of sentences she inhabits in the historical record. The same empire that is, right now, sending something across the cold grey water of the Korea Strait toward the western shore of the archipelago. She does not know yet what they are bringing, but she understands, immediately and completely, what their arrival means. It means the world is watching. It means the relationship between the Yamatai and the Great Way, which has been maintained through the exchange of tribute and gifts and formal diplomatic correspondence since the time of Himiko, is continuing. It means the continental empire has decided that the Yamatai is still worth engaging with. Which means, in the political vocabulary of the era, that the Yamatai is still legitimate. Breathe in the significance of that. In a world without written law and without formal institutional structures, legitimacy is not a given. It is a continuous achievement. It must be maintained, renewed, demonstrated, again and again, through the accumulation of acts and relationships that confirm it. The arrival of ships from the Way is one of those acts, one of the most important ones available. Because the Way is the most powerful political entity in the East Asian world, and its willingness to send ships to the Yamatai is a statement that every chieftain in the archipelago can read. The center is still the center. The Way knows where the center is, and the Way has sent ships to confirm it. Scuff, scuff, scuff. She can hear, even from the inner chamber, the change in the quality of movement in the outer corridors. The footsteps are faster, more numerous. The particular acceleration of a palace that has received significant news and is beginning to respond to it. Officials are being summoned. The protocol for receiving continental delegations is being reviewed because it has not been needed for some time, and the specific sequence of the ceremony is the kind of thing that fades from active memory when it is not used. She calls for the brother. Inhale, and the preparations begin. Exhale, and the palace mobilizes. He arrives quickly, more quickly than usual. Even the brother, trained to a composure that approaches the imperturbable, is moving with a slight additional energy today. She can hear it in the quality of the swish as he comes through the silk curtain. She gives him a list of things, ordered by priority. The condition of the reception hall, which needs to be prepared. The status of the palace stores, from which the gifts for the continental delegation will be selected. the protocol sequence for a formal delegation from a recognized imperial power, and the roads between the western coast and the Yamatai, which the delegation will travel, and which need to be in a condition appropriate for the transit of important guests. The brother receives all of this without notes. He has notes somewhere, but in this room, with the oracle, notes are not used. The communication between the oracle and the brother is oral, as it has always been. The spoken word carrying in its texture and emphasis information that the written word would flatten. He withdraws. The palace is now in motion around her. She can feel it in the timbers, the slight additional vibration of more feet moving with more purpose through the corridors and the outer compound. A palace preparing to receive a delegation is a different organism from a palace in its ordinary routine. More directed, more energized. The way a river is different when rain has fallen in the mountains and the water level is rising. She sits in the center of all of it, still, breathing, the eye of the activity. This is also part of the work, staying still while everything moves, being the fixed point that the movement can orient itself around, the mirror at the center of the preparation, reflecting not light, but the direction of effort. This way. This is what needs to happen. This is the priority. This is the sequence. Thud, thud, thud. From the direction of the construction areas at the edge of the compound, the sound of the preparation made physical. Scaffolding being adjusted, surfaces being cleaned. The percussion of a palace making itself presentable for a significant visit. It is a satisfying sound. The sound of competence being applied to a clear task. The sound of the network functioning the way it is supposed to function, organizing itself around a shared purpose. Breathe in the organized activity of the preparing palace. Let the sound of the footsteps and the construction and the raised voices of officials coordinating with each other settle into a comfortable background hum. The ships are on the water. They will arrive in days, and the Yamatai is getting ready. Sink down into the preparations. Sink down into the quiet of the inner chamber at the center of all the activity. The oracle is still. The palace is moving. The ships are crossing the cold grey water, and the world is about to arrive at the door. Just breathe. Just rest. The preparations will continue without you, and the ships know the way. Listen. Listen to the sound of two worlds trying to understand each other. The delegation from the Way has arrived. They came up the road from the western coast over 4 days, traveling with the particular, unhurried confidence of people who represent a power large enough that they do not need to hurry. They are 8 in number. A senior official, 3 administrative assistants, 2 soldiers whose role is ceremonial rather than protective, and 2 interpreters, which tells you something important about the nature of the encounter. 2 interpreters. One for the language of the Korean Peninsula, which serves as the intermediate language, the common tongue through which the Wa world and the Wei world have been communicating for a generation. And one for the Wa language itself, which the Wei interpreter has studied but does not speak with the fluency that the Korean interpreter achieves. The conversation, when it happens, will travel through at least one, and sometimes 2 layers of translation, which means that every word spoken in this meeting will arrive at its destination changed, filtered, slightly different from what was sent. This is the ordinary condition of diplomacy, and of most human communication, if you look at it honestly. Scuff, bow, stillness. The formal reception takes place in the hall. The arrangement of the space has been prepared with care. The way official sits in the position of honored guest, at the north end of the hall, facing south, which is the position of authority in the continental system. The brother sits opposite, representing the oracle, dressed in the most formal robes available in the palace stores. The interpreters sit to the sides. The administrative assistants of the Wei delegation are arranged behind their senior official. The palace officials are arranged behind the brother. Everyone in the room is performing a role that has been established by protocol. The performance is not insincere. The formality is not a pretense. It is, rather, the agreed-upon language of the encounter, the shared vocabulary that both parties have consented to use because it provides a structure within which genuinely significant communication can occur. Without the structure, there is only the fact of 2 groups of people from very different places sitting in a room together with an enormous gap of language and culture between them. With the structure, there is a meeting. The brother speaks first, in the formal language of the oracle's representative. He delivers the greeting of the Queen of Wa to the honored delegation of the Great Wei, in the specific, protocol-appropriate language that the archives of the Yamatai have preserved from the time of Himiko's correspondence. The interpreter renders it into the intermediate language. The Wei interpreter renders it from the intermediate language into the official language of the continental court. The senior Wei official receives it with the expression of a man who has attended many such receptions and has learned to hear the message beneath the ceremony. Inhale, and the formality settles. Exhale, and the communication begins. Then the Wei official speaks. His words travel back through the chain of interpretation in the other direction. He brings greetings from the emperor. He acknowledges the succession. He acknowledges specifically and deliberately the name of Iyo, the new Queen of Wa, which means the Wei has received the reports of the succession and has incorporated them into its administrative understanding of the political situation in the archipelago. This is significant, more significant than the words themselves. The Wei acknowledges Iyo by name, which means, in the political vocabulary of the era, that the Wei recognizes her, that the succession has been validated by the most powerful external authority available, that the golden seal and the relationship it represents are continuing under the new queen rather than being suspended pending clarification of the political situation. The brother receives this. He carries it through the silk curtain to the inner chamber. He speaks it quietly to Iyo, who is sitting in the posture of the oracle, breathing slowly, receiving everything. She is quiet for a moment, a long moment, the kind of silence that the brother has learned to read as thinking rather than the silence of the oracle's reception. Then she speaks. She gives him her response. He carries it back through the curtain. And so the meeting continues, back and forth, Silk curtain to reception hall to silk curtain. The brother moving between the two worlds with the particular, worn efficiency of a man who has made this journey many times and has learned to carry each message with the same quality of care, regardless of its content. Murmur, swish, pause, murmur, swish, pause. The practical matters are discussed. The tribute that the Yamatai has prepared for the way, the gifts that the way has brought in return, the reporting of the political situation in the archipelago, which the way official receives with careful, professional attention, not because he will personally analyze it, but because it will travel back to the continent in his written report and be read by people whose job it is to maintain the way's understanding of the political geography of the Eastern Archipelago. And then something less expected. The way official asks, through the chain of translation, about the new queen. Not politically, personally. He asks her age. He asks how she came to be chosen. He asks, in the careful, indirect language of someone who is curious but is operating within the constraints of diplomatic protocol, what she is like. This is unusual. This is not in the protocol. It is a human question rather than an administrative one. And it arrives at the inner chamber through the brother's translation with something of its humanity intact, which is remarkable given the number of linguistic and ceremonial layers it has passed through. She considers it. She gives an answer. The answer is brief and does not perform. It says, she is young, and she is learning, and she is listening. The answer travels back through the chain. The way official receives it. He nods. Something in his expression, the brother will report later, shifts slightly, becomes slightly less formal. The expression of a man who has received an honest answer in a context where honest answers are not always available and has recognized it for what it is. Inhale, and the meeting continues. Exhale, and the worlds communicate. The formal part of the reception ends in the late afternoon. The way delegation is shown to the guest quarters. The brother returns to the inner chamber. He is tired. The particular tiredness of a man who has been carrying messages between two worlds all day, ensuring that each one arrives in a form that is both accurate and appropriate, which is more demanding work than it sounds. She receives his final report of the day. She thanks him. He withdraws. She sits in the quiet of the late afternoon. The way official's question is still in the room with her. What is she like? She gave an honest answer, and it was the right answer, and it was also not a complete answer, because no answer to that question is ever complete. But it was true, young, learning, listening. She is all of those things. And tonight, after a day of watching the two worlds try to communicate through their layers of language and ceremony, she is also something else. She is grateful. Quietly, unexpectedly, deeply grateful. For the structure of the meeting, for the protocol that provided a shared vocabulary where there was no shared language, for the chain of interpretation that carried the messages back and forth, imperfect and filtered, but real. For the way official who asked a human question in the middle of a diplomatic meeting. For the answer she was able to give. For the fact that the world is still talking. Sink down into the quiet of the late afternoon chamber. Sink down into the gratitude and the fatigue and the particular, complex peace of a day in which two very different worlds sat in the same room and tried, with the tools available to them, to understand each other. The delegation is in the guest quarters. The brother is resting. The palace is settling into its evening. And the oracle is sitting in the amber light, grateful for the talking, grateful for the listening, grateful for the fact that the ships came. Just breathe. Just rest. The world is still talking, and the listening is its own kind of work. Listen. Listen to the sound of things being made permanent. The delegation from the Way has been at the Yamatai for 3 days. The formal meetings are complete. The tribute has been exchanged. The practical matters have been discussed, recorded in the administrative shorthand of the Way officials, and will eventually make their way into the chronicles that become the Way Jue, the record in which Iyo's handful of sentences lives. The relationship has been confirmed. The succession has been acknowledged. The center has been seen by the most significant external witness available. Now comes the last and in some ways the most important part. The gifts. Scuff. Bow. Place. Stillness. They are brought into the reception hall one at a time, each one presented with ceremony, each one received with ceremony. The sequence of presentation and reception itself, a language that both parties understand and are using with precision. From the Yamatai, tribute in the form that has been established by the correspondence of Himiko's time. Slaves, the chronicles will record, which is the diplomatic vocabulary of the era for a specific kind of formal gift that signals the depth of the relationship. Cloth. Products of the archipelago that speak of the specific resources and capabilities of the Wa world. From the Way, bronze mirrors. More bronze mirrors. The same currency that flowed through the Yamatai's political network, confirming relationships and signaling authority and making the center visible to the periphery. Iron. Cloth of the continental variety, which is different in texture and dye from the cloth of the archipelago, and which carries in its difference the value of the exotic and the distant. And a document. A written document. In the formal script of the Continental Court, bearing the seal of the Way administration, addressed to the Queen of Wa. The brother carries it through the silk curtain. He places it in front of Iyo with the particular care of someone handling something that is both physically fragile and politically significant. It is a small object, a scroll of cloth, not paper, wound around a wooden cylinder and tied with a cord of silk. It weighs almost nothing. It contains, in the formal language of the imperial court, the acknowledgement of Iyo's succession and the continuation of the relationship between the Great Way and the Queen of Wa. She looks at it without touching it for a moment. This is a habit she has developed with significant objects. The moment of not touching. The moment of simply being present with the thing before engaging with it. The way she sits with the bone before placing it over the fire. Inhale, and the document settles. Exhale, and the significance settles with it. She cannot read it. The written language of the Continental Court is not hers. The interpreters will render its content into spoken form, and the brother will carry the spoken form to her. But she does not need to read it to understand what it is. She understands it the way she understands the frequency in the pre-dawn silence. Not through the language, through the quality. The document says, "You exist." The document says, "The way knows you exist." The document says, "The relationship continues." In a world where the written record is still so new and so rare and so concentrated in the hands of the powerful that most people will go their entire lives without seeing it, a written document from the most powerful empire in the East Asian world is not just a communication. It is a fact. It is, in its way, a kind of mound, a deliberate, permanent, human-made thing that sits in the landscape of the political world and says, "This happened. This relationship exists. This center is real." She has the document stored in the palace archive, in the cedar box that contains the other correspondence of the Yamatai, the records of the relationship between these islands and the continental world that Himiko built and she is now maintaining. She thinks briefly about the people who will open that box in the future. Not 2 years from now, further, much further. The people who will find these documents and piece together from them the fragments of a political world that will have, by then, been gone for so long that the word gone is inadequate. The scholars who will read the wager and find her name there, the handful of sentences. Iyo, 13 years old. The wars stopped. She does not know what they will make of it. She does not know what can be made of a handful of sentences by people who are 1,500 years away from the room in which the sentences were earned. But she hopes, in the quiet, private way she hopes things, that the distance will not matter, that the fact of the sentences will be enough, that someone, somewhere in that distant future, will read the handful of words and understand, without needing more than those words, what it meant to be 13 years old and present in this room, breathing. The Wei delegation departs the following morning, early, before the heat of the day. Their footsteps on the packed earth of the outer compound are brisk and organized, the footsteps of people with a known destination and a reliable route. She hears them from the inner chamber, the particular quality of departure, the sound of people leaving, carrying with them the record of what happened here, moving back toward the water and the ships and the cold grey crossing that will carry them home. Scuff, 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 fading, fading, gone. The compound is quiet. The gate is closed. The palace is resuming its ordinary rhythm, the acceleration of the past 3 days settling back into the reliable, sustainable pace of the regular work. She sits in the stillness of the departure. The cedar box with the document inside is in the archive room. The tribute is in the stores. The continental gifts are in the treasury. The relationship has been confirmed, the succession acknowledged, the record made. And somewhere on the western shore of the archipelago, The ships of the way are being prepared for the crossing. The sailors are checking the rigging and reading the weather and making the 1,000 small, practical decisions of people about to commit themselves to open water. They will cross the cold strait. They will arrive at the far shore. They will make their report, and the chronicle will receive it. And eventually, much later, the chronicle will preserve it. In the handful of sentences, that is all that remains of Iyo in the written record of the world. Inhale, and the ships prepare to sail. Exhale, and the record is complete. She breathes. The palace breathes around her. The plain is ordinary and patient and wide. And in the cedar archive box, the document rests in the dark, waiting to say what it has to say to whoever comes to read it. Sink down into the quiet of the departure morning. Sink down into the stillness that follows the leaving, the particular, clean, spacious quiet of a place from which something significant has just departed, and which is now itself again. The oracle is breathing. The palace is resuming. The ships are sailing. And the record is in the dark, keeping faith with the fact of what happened here. Good night. Just breathe. The ships know the way home. The document remembers. And the silence is holding everything you need to know.